Hey, everybody. Welcome to this BFI training sampler on intelligent employee experience, orchestrating personalized journeys at scale. We're going to explore today how to transform your organization's approach to talent development through AI-driven personalization. I'm Jeff Wellstead, and my work over the past 2 decades spans three particularly interesting missions. The first of which is elevating HR leaders into strategic insight-driven partners, consultants, if you will, through AI coaching and capability building. I also spend time guiding HR tech companies to design and scale ethical, people-centered AI solutions. And then finally, I focus on championing a skills-based organizational model where fluid skills first talent models replace much more rigid job structures in terms of the way that we've always ever thought about work. Our focus today is creating a tailored employee journey at scale without dramatically increasing the workload for our HR teams. We're going to use large language models, or LLMs, as I'll refer to them, to help us provide personalized digital experience that can really kind of empower employees to really take ownership of their growth and development. And by leveraging AI and data-driven insights, we can orchestrate these personalized journeys reasonably automatically, delivering the right content and recommendations to each individual. And this will allow your organization to support the needs and goals of every employee, driving engagement and retention and internal mobility, which is exactly what we need to see these days. So I'm really excited to kind of do a deeper dive into this and into the practical tools and the techniques we can use basically to bring this world to life. The main objective of this session is to explore how AI tools can enhance the employee journey, really from onboarding all the way through to career advancement and beyond. We'll look at how to use AI solutions to identify personalized development opportunities for employees. And a key focus will be on leveraging the LLMs, the large language models, to generate tailored development plans based on anonymized career data. And we'll also discuss how to use AI to create more customized growth opportunities, such as mentorship matches and personalized stretch assignments. The goal here basically is to build on your existing HR processes and leverage AI capabilities to deliver a more personalized and impactful employee experience. AI-powered career pathing really can help employees see their growth potential within the organization. This is that sort of skills first or skills based organizational model that you hear so many people like Josh Bersin or David Ulrich or some of the other thought leaders in the HR space talk about. It's magical because it gives us a basis for understanding where somebody is in the organization, what skills they have relative to the skills that have been assigned to the role that they occupy, and basically trying to figure out how to marry those things up and then figure out developmentally how it is we can align people as closely to their current roles, but also potentially future roles as possible. And basically, the skills component becomes sort of like your Lego building block, if you will, to kind of like start to piece that all together. It also kind of feeds a lot of other elements too, like curated learning recommendations that are tailored to individual needs and their goals, and ensures that our employees can develop like the right skills to achieve their desired ambitions. And sophisticated AI-based mentor matching connects employees to the right mentors to help support their development. So yes, even though we're using AI to create the matches, humans in the loop are always ever essential. Look, retaining employees is critical. When people see a clear future for themselves, they are more likely to stay, to dedicate more discretionary effort, and ultimately to be more productive. Aligning growth plans with business needs, this is essential, really ensures that the organization can meet its strategic goals, which is absolutely critical. AI-powered personalization really kind of allows us to scale employee development plans and programs rather, and without necessarily kind of increasing the amount of headcount we have dedicated to that process. I'm just going to cover some of the elements associated with practical implementation of a digital roadmap for career development and learning. And it highlights kind of like three key steps, right? The first of which, and you'll hear me harp on about this quite a lot, is anonymizing the employee data to protect the privacy and preserve the career patterns. And what do I mean by that? We ultimately want to remove anything that is a personal identifier, right? Like names, like IDs, possibly even exact job titles and things of that nature. And instead, we want to replace those with sort of, I guess, encrypted codes that we understand and we can use to translate that data back. Okay. So you always ever remove any personal identifiers, before you start working with an LLM. Secondly, we want to use language models to generate personalized development plans based on skills, interests, and importantly, company needs. These are data sets that potentially live outside of HR's purview, but AI doesn't necessarily see boundaries. Instead, it suggests synergies. It thinks across systems, which is brilliant because it has something to teach us in terms of that. We should all live in organizations that basically think across all the functions. And then third, enhancing the plans beyond just online coursework with things like stretch projects or potential mentors to align with the employee goals is a very, very critical and important consideration. The common pitfalls that we want to avoid would be doing things like just going and creating generic plans. We've had plenty of that in our legacy, and we don't want to be doing that. We're not sheep dipping people day in and day out with the same training and hoping for a magical result. We need to basically create opportunities that are perfectly aligned with the direction they want to go as employees and the direction the organization needs them to go. Okay. And then the other thing is when we miss critical employee input and we just make assumptions that, oh, you're in this particular job bracket, this job family, you have this job title, you therefore have to go through X, Y, and Z training. Okay, that may be true on a compliance or a heavily regulated kind of industry sector for sure. But we don't want to do that with all the training. What we want to do is we want to listen and hear what this individual knows. We want to assess them against the skill sets that we kind of created for the different roles in the organization. And we want to figure out what those gaps are so that we can kind of develop a 12-month plan to really help people, kind of catch up. Okay. And then lastly, we always ever have privacy concerns. But again, we'll kind of address some of that stuff later on. The key ultimately is to tailor plans, right, to the company's strategic priorities and the employee's aspirations, right, and maintain strict anonymization protocols in the process. So today's employees really expect the same level of personalization in their professional development as they get in their personal lives, right? This notion of consumerization is everywhere, has been for quite some time, really from like Netflix recommendations to Amazon shopping experiences. Okay. So advances in AI technology now enable HR teams to provide the same level of personalized career development support without necessarily overwhelming their resources. And I'm going to actually show you how you can kind of do this directly in an LLM. The key really is to leverage data and AI to kind of create a tailored employee journey with personalized touch points from hiring through to career advancement. And this allows organizations to deliver that Netflix-like experience where we kind of can anticipate, what training falls after, the prior experience that you've had, to read through your ambitions and to basically start to predict the things that are going to be useful and powerful for your growth. So that's ultimately what we want to do, is we want to tap into each employee's unique needs and help them grow their careers. The result, of course, is a far more engaged and productive workforce, right, that feels empowered to reach their full potential. But you'll be happy to know not all of this is going to just simply fall to you and a large language model to figure out, especially if you have a larger organization that would appear rather daunting. There are plenty of, in fact, hundreds of employee experience platforms on the market today. And we're not advocating for any one of these solutions in particular, because each one of them has their own strengths, their own use cases, their own area of focus, their own costings. But rather, we just wanted to pluck out those that tend to be most popular at the moment, um, and do span, the small to medium sized enterprise on through to large enterprise customers. So let me just kind of shoot through a number of these and kind of tell you what they're all about. So there's a company called Fuel 50, which is an AI powered career pathing platform that maps personalized growth opportunities for employees based on their skills, on their interests, and on the company's needs, just like what we were talking about. And it has driven a 65% increase, their figures, not mine, in internal mobility at companies using AI-powered career mapping capabilities. But you can imagine that would be a huge boost. It would help you with your workforce planning. It would dramatically reduce the cost of recruitment. And frankly, it would leave people feeling like they've got a real future. Edcast is a learning experience platform that curates content aligned with both employee goals and organizational priorities. You're going to hear this theme over and over again, is to marry these two things up so that they are connected and one and the same. And this has tended to lead to a 3x higher completion rate for AI recommended learning paths, which is a big issue because a lot of people get these learning paths and they just park them. They put them on the shelf because, frankly, they're too busy with their day job and can't imagine it. But when it's perfectly aligned with what it is you want, and actually aligned also with what the organization needs, that works out quite well. Degreed is a skill tracking and development platform that measures employee growth and suggests strategic next steps, right? Providing 40% more accurate skill gap identification compared to manual methods, which is super helpful. Eightfold, you may have heard of, is typically for large enterprises. It's an AI-powered talent intelligence platform, which is a category, talent intelligence, that provides predictive career trajectories and personalized development plans and pathways based on skills, on potential as calculated by their algorithm and company needs, right? And it helps basically to retain top talent. Clue, which in all transparency is a company I am supporting from a consultancy perspective and kind of helping them think through their own product development and growth, is a small to medium-sized enterprise focused skills intelligence platform. And they use AI to match employees with personalized career coaching and development opportunities and skill building recommendations and increasing employee confidence and accelerating their professional development. Udemy, I'm sure many of you have heard about Udemy. Udemy for Business is a very large corporate learning platform with 28,000 plus expert-led courses and AI-driven personalized learning paths. And they claim to say that this has led to a 58% higher retention rate and 50% increase in productivity. Again, I'm not quite sure how they measure that, but those are some bold statements. Paradox is a somewhat, conversational AI recruitment platform, with a virtual assistant called Olivia that automates hiring tasks and helps basically smooth out what is oftentimes a painful candidate experience and also difficult for internal talent acquisition teams as well. And it helps to improve candidate experience and increases the net promoter scores quite substantially. And then finally, Harriet HR. I have it kind of like show you guys that. Harriet HR is a very interesting tool. It's an AI-powered HR support platform that automates 70% of routine employee queries and converts complex requests into trackable tickets. And it saves HR teams, just many, many hours on a weekly basis from the sort of, typical operational and HR help desk type tasks they normally get into. This helps automate that entire thing. But you can see basically these are different platforms that somehow perform different types of things. And I think what the thread is that connects all of these things is that they are personalized. They get to know the employee inside and out. They ask for inputs from the employee. They get inputs from HR. They get inputs from line managers. They get inputs from the organizational goals and all sorts of things. And it's really then the AI that kind of figures out how is this all going to come together and how can I make this meaningful for each individual involved. Again, not to harp on it too strongly, but I guess you can't harp on it too strongly. Data privacy and security are really critical, right, when using large language models for HR applications. And we must thoroughly anonymize and protect employee data before feeding it into any AI system, even if, and this does actually exist, even if they claim that none of your data will be used as training data for the large language model. You always ever want to make sure that you are good and clear in terms of managing your sensitive data that is protected by GDPR, that is protected by the EU AI Act, and make sure that you do things like remove names and IDs and emails and other personal identifiers. And you replace identifiers with anonymous codes, right, to maintain data relationships. Because you still want to measure these elements, right? You still want to measure demographic aspects and things of that nature. But if you take away and convert the critical identifiers with generic codes that are unique to each individual, so you can kind of reverse engineer that stuff when you're done, that is the proper way to handle this stuff. You want to make sure that you're preserving career trajectories and learning patterns, right, while you're protecting privacy overall. And you want to implement sort of a role-based access control, right, for AI-generated outputs. In other words, not everybody gets, full access to everything that the LLM comes back to. You also importantly want to create audit trails and documentation for all AI interactions involving employee data. This is a lot easier, and I'm going to show you how, a lot easier than you think, because at least ChatGPT 5 that I'm going to be using today will actually do a lot of that work for you and will actually save your interaction so that you have record of it. And please never use raw, unanonymized HR data with public LLMs. Always use enterprise solutions with proper data protection and make sure that you verify that that data protection is there. Right. This is where we get into it. This is where it gets fun. I'm going to introduce you to the concept of using an LLM and prompting it to create personalized 12-month development plans for employees. Okay. The base prompt template will allow us to generate an initial plan based on the employee's career and learning data focused on building digital leadership skills. Okay, that's sort of the overarching goal here. And we're going to use and create a fictional company to do that. And this is kind of part of the thinking process that humans are always ever going to be required to deliver to. And it's going to be something that's ultimately going to become a critical skill, possibly a new skill for some people, in terms of how it is they engage with the LLM. Okay. And then we're also going to take a look at that. Actually, once we set up the fictional company, once we set up these fictional employees, they call this synthetic data. We are then going to hit it with this base prompt template. And then we're possibly going to do an iteration, as mentioned down below. But we'll see how ChatGPT handles all this. And hopefully this will take us to the next level. So I'm just going to now share my screen and introduce you to ChatGPT 5. I'm sure a number of you have played with this. ChatGPT 5 is the latest iteration, a couple of weeks old now, that's been launched by OpenAI. And basically what they did is they sucked in all of the previous models, right? 3.0, 3.5, 4.0, all sorts. And they basically built one model that has a couple of different options associated with it. The auto option, which is depending on your query, depending on your prompt, it will determine, does it need to be super fast and can it just come out of sort of a mini mode and basically kind of instantaneously generate itself? Or do I need to think about this for quite some time? because reasoning is going to be involved. And that can actually take, literally 30 seconds on through to a couple of minutes. And it feels like forever when you're staring at the screen, but it's really quite cool because it also goes through a chain of thinking and shows you what it is it's working on. Right. Here was my challenge. I needed to create a fictional company. I also wanted to create 5 fictional employees, and I wanted each of those employees to be at a different level in the organization and have different focus areas. But I wanted to make sure too that I used this prompt that popped up in my presentation. And so what I've done here is I've actually set the context and explained to ChatGPT, this is what I'm trying to do. I got to create this presentation and I got to give you more context. Here's, please create a synthetic data set of 5 employees, right? With this materials engineering company that I made up called Mysterious Metals Incorporated. And I said, each of these 5 employees have to have different jobs from one another. And basically, they all have to have 12-month, development plans. So that's what this query was about. So what I was doing is I was sharing the question ahead of time to help it create the data to answer that question, which is quite fascinating. And I wasn't sure it was going to work, to be perfectly honest. It was kind of complicated. But if you notice, there's nothing fancy about my writing. This is not code. This is not some foreign language that you have to stop everything and spend the next 2 years learning about. This is you talking to a machine. Okay. What you do need to do, though, is to kind of think through your problem-solving mindset and just kind of like, start to say, well, I have this end point. I'm going to start with the end in mind, but I got to work back to the beginning and I got to help the computer understand what it is I'm trying to accomplish. And it's that process that really kind of helps you frame up and develop the best possible prompts. I'm sure my prompt didn't need to be this long. I have a habit of mansplaining to ChatGPT, which I'm sure laughs at me when I do this. But quite frankly, I get some really good outcomes. Anyway, I did at the end, and this is important. I did say, look, ChatGPT, if you struggle with my instructions, please ask me any clarifying questions such that we can get the best possible outcome. And I always end up with a thank you. It basically came back and said, perfect, great, thank you for the detailed instructions, and then went about explaining the way it was going to think about this challenge, which I thought was super helpful because that in turn helps me understand how this challenge is going to kind of form up. And I'm going through this, and it said, hold on a minute, before I generate this, let me check my understanding and ask a couple of clarifying questions. Cool. It then said, here's my plan for you. Step 1, create a company, well, actually create the company priorities. So in other words, like what are the cultural big things and or company focus elements that are going to be really critical here, okay? Because that does factor into the development plan. Step 2, create the synthetic profile data. And it told me, did I hear you right? Here's what you told me to do. And here's what I'll do. Okay, I'll put these elements together. That's really awesome. I didn't ask it to do that, but it basically knew the problem I'm trying to solve for and helped me solve for it. And then finally, it said step 3, development plans. And for each employee, it said, right, I'm going to create a 12-month development plan. I'm going to specify learning resources. I'm going to emphasize digital leadership, and I'm going to emphasize physical leadership as well. Okay. And then here are the clarifying questions. Okay. Would I like a company catalog of courses to be created, right, out of thin air so that I can kind of apply those, right? Or would you prefer I invent something completely different for these folks? Should I present a final 12-month development plan as a table? So it's now kind of, I forgot to do that in the original prompt. You typically would do that. Say, here's how I need you to present this to me. So it's asking me, do you want a table per employee, really clear, structured milestone view, or would you rather a narrative, personalized format, which I quite like. I think that's cool. So once you have this, then I can set this whole thing up. And I said, in answer to your brilliant question, I then went and answered all the questions. I said, basically, yeah, create a course catalog. That's going to be part of it. But I also want you to include the other types of training options as well. Okay. And I want you to basically present this in terms of this question you asked me. How do you want me to present it? I basically said, I think the narrative personalized plan format is best. And you'll notice from a grammar perspective, right? I didn't, necessarily spend time putting its question to me in quotes or didn't have any kind of special formatting. I just reiterated the question and I just answered it in the last sentence. And it did it. It then further went on to give me something or ask me if I wanted something that, frankly, I don't think I've ever seen before, which is a JSON table or spreadsheet, which is, frankly, a list of all the code that basically would explain, how this LLM got there. Now, why is that important? I'm not a programmer. Frankly, if I'd asked for that and I got it, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Not the simplest. But if there was ever a situation that I got audited, right? And the folks from the EU who kind of run the EU AI Act or any such regulation were sat at my desk and saying, "Hey, listen, we need to kind of go into this particular incident. Can you do me a favor and present to me the code that the large language model used to come up with this?" That would really help us kind of like pull apart where potentially things might have gone wrong. You have that option now. Okay. And so ChatGPT 5 minimally is thinking through these issues. Okay. So then kind of reiterated, right? All of these elements, it kind of created this stuff for me. And I would normally do this live in terms of doing this, but it did a bunch of thinking and it kind of blew a bunch of time. And I know that our time here is precious. But it basically said, step one, here are the company priorities. And it kind of created this generic set of priorities that you probably see at a lot of companies, to be perfectly honest, but it's cool, right? Then it said, here's your learning catalog, 12 things. And then it further said, these will be reused, but I will also invent some bespoke add-ons for each individual, like shadowing and coaching and project ownership. I did not ask for that. Okay, that was going to be in the second prompt that we were going to ask it, and it basically anticipated it, interestingly. And then third step, it basically would take each of these employee profiles with fake names, right? And basically, give them relative job titles and then explain what their background is in terms of how do they get here, what do they do before they got here, and so forth. And that helps set the context for creating a good development plan. And then it went through and created the 12-month development plan along with alignment to priorities in the business. Okay, which is really cool. Now, again, this is a narrative thing. This is a quick and dirty exercise. This can go a lot deeper, and I'll show you in a minute. It then went through employee 2, employee 3, employee 4, employee 5, paying attention to the nuances, the fact that, these individual contributors were also aspiring managers. So it kind of like anticipated, okay, they're going to need some, kind of leadership training in the future here, in the very near future. And how to lead hybrid teams and, possibly a stretch project and all this other kind of stuff. So this is fantastic. It's created, I guess it was for 6 employees. It created like, good skeleton, good scaffolding for a 12-month development plan. And then it further almost always ever asks, would you like to see this another way? Would you like to additionally see this as well? Right? And it kind of gets your wheels cranking, which is really quite useful. And that's what's magic about this. Look, these may not be perfect. I might read through some of these and be like, oof, I know who this individual contributor is, called Elena V, and she would never ever go for this. There's going to be aspects of this that she really, really needs to go focus on instead of what's been taught here. So I could just basically go in and say, for instance, if I click down here for Elena V, can you please add in some additional learning associated with, let's say that we're actually thinking about transferring her over to Germany from the UK. Yeah, they move to Germany. So she'll need local language lessons as well as cultural integration learning, as she will be transferring there as soon as 6 months from now. Okay, so completely threw a curveball in there. Let's see what it comes up with. This is made up data, but let's see what it can do. Okay, now it said, great, thanks for the context, right, around the relocation. This is what I heard you say. Here is her updated 12-month plan. And so now she's being enrolled in beginning German language intensive. Fantastic. Let's see what else is going on here. Presentation and storytelling for technical leaders in both English and beginner German. Nice one. Participating in cultural integration. Awesome. You can see, because this literally takes seconds, how quickly you could rip through a whole bunch of these and really come up with some very fascinating insights. The challenge is always ever, what is the data upon which you are basing these decisions? And where is it you're getting that information from? My situation was easy. I just told ChatGPT to make it up, and it did at speed. Okay. But it's going to be really kind of down to you and HR to kind of figure out, what is sort of the best way to kind of reach and develop these people. So I would basically say that you probably want to focus your time specifically on special cases in the organization where people are going into critical leadership roles, where people are migrating from an individual contributor to a people management role, where there is certain specialized training that is going to be absolutely critical for their next 3, 6, 12 months. And basically you focus on that stuff. And the other thing is that you probably want to engage a vendor similar to like Udemy for Business or, some of those others that we spoke about, and basically, kind of query what they are coming up with, and whether or not that makes sense for you to engage with. Because if in fact, well, if you were running a company of 500 employees, to sit there basically and go through them one at a time like that would take forever. But you can see though how quickly, once you have the contextual information, for instance, once you have all of the goals and all the details around what the company needs to accomplish, and you have any kind of contextual details around the employees, very quickly AI can start to do some rather magical things in terms of matching things up. So that is just a taster. Obviously, in our full-blown courses, we would go into much more detail and actually get you hands-on with some of this stuff. In addition to that, we would always ever suggest too that you undertake what I call a 7-day action plan to actually, after the training, go and play with ChatGPT. Don't forget what we talked about. Go have some fun. And if you're nervous about, did you anonymize your data sets properly in terms of using real data, don't use real data. Just go through the process I trained you on here, which is ask ChatGPT to create synthetic data sets depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish and dive into. Okay. So find a single employee journey, first of all. Start small, start narrow, right? And focus on that. It could be like onboarding, it could be learning and development, it could be internal mobility. And then next, you'll want to prepare a small anonymized data set. Again, you can create synthetic data using ChatGPT, and then basically use that sample data to kind of test and play with an experiment with AI. Then run this data through the provided AI prompts of your chosen platform. Simple structure around prompt development, which is give ChatGPT a role, right? Go be smart about this. I need you to be globally expert about this. It really helps narrow the focus of engagement with the internet. Okay. The next thing you want to do is provide context, and as much context as you can provide without being too repetitive, right? Because then it gets a bit silly. But you just want to basically make sure ChatGPT understands what you're trying to get done. And then you basically iterate on this whole process. So you want to kind of evaluate, does this output actually make sense? Or do I need to kind of go back and tweak it or say, no, that's not what I was looking for. I want to try something else. And then you can always ask for the format in terms of how it is you want that data returned to you. There's a table, it could be charts, it could be, all sorts of things, just simple narrative form, all sorts of things. And go have some fun with it. Get comfortable with it. This is a killer tool. It's truly amazing, but it does not replace human beings. Okay, certainly at least not yet. We're a far way from that because it really needs a lot of human judgment. It needs a lot of human steering, and it needs that contextual component that only our brains with the gray matter between our ears can really supply. Okay. And finally, a couple of points about this notion about personalization, which is really the essence, I think, of employee experience. And I should say, good and well-informed personalization that makes me feel like the system gets me and understands me and is helping me grow and develop in the right direction. Personalization is a super powerful tool for driving both retention and engagement and productivity. And studies have shown, several studies, in fact, have shown that employees with personalized development plans are 76% more likely to stay with their company for over 3 years. And personalized learning recommendations are accessed 4 times more frequently than general catalogs, which really kind of indicates a very strong appetite for content that was tailored to me. And HR professionals are saving somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 70% of their time previously spent on manual career planning when using AI-powered personalization tools. So it is a huge cost savings, not to mention it never gets tired. And it always looks around corners and it always suggests things that you probably haven't quite thought through yet, which is phenomenal. So it keeps us sharp as an augmentation. Personalization is really no longer a nice to have. It's becoming really essential for organizations. When you think about this consumerized experience that we all have in our personal lives, we really need to bring that in-house now. Okay. And we'd love it if you don't mind to share with us your thoughts and to let us know, what you think about this course concept. Would you like to see much more in terms of all of this? And could you also provide any thoughts or ideas about improvements that you think would be helpful to us? Really appreciate your listening today, and I really hope you found this as being helpful. Thank you.